Do you like playing mages in your games? Well, let's talk magic systems. In the first half of this video, I'll be talking about magic systems in TTRPGs in general, and in the latter half of this video, I'll be talking about how I'm doing it in my game. Because I'm making a risky and dramatic combat fantasy role-playing game called Sanctum, that I've been working on for basically 2 years, and if there's one thing that's been a big challenge throughout, it's the creation of the magic system. Different games do very different things, and as a result, whatever I make and whatever the biggest games make, there are going to be people that say it's objectively bad. Which is an objectively bad statement because taste is subjective. I want Sanctum's magic system to be different. I want it to be unique and different for the sake of executing a specific fantasy. And that fantasy is magic being dangerous. For comparison, let's run through some other games because there are basically only 2 ways to do magic systems. Ones where there's a list of fixed spells, or those where it's more freeform. Games with fixed spells would be the likes of D&D and Pathfinder. Both use slots and fixed magic spell lists because they're intended to be balanced, but they have limitations, which has long been discussed online for the good parts and the bad parts. Having fixed spells lets you have a wide array of spells, each with a limited use. It gives the feeling of having a lot of magic, regardless of how true that feeling is. The thing with these games in particular is that they're more geared towards making fantasy superheroes that are incredibly hard to kill. As a result, the magic system feels more like a consequence-free superpower, where the only consequence of using spells is running out of slots. Like, the only spell that has any sort of drawback is haste, which makes you EP. And also, to anyone that says mana points are so much better because they're more realistic and easy to explain. What are you on about, mate? Points and slots are both expendable meta currency resources with no realism whatsoever. Madness! Get a grip. Another problem that people cite is that the whole spell list and slot arrangement isn't very chaotic. Chaotic being the buzzword that people use to allure buyers into this idea that they're one of the real ones, but yeah. Spells don't feel like you're tapping into some strange force. But that is a result of the intended design. It's not a bug, it's a feature. If you don't like it, then don't play it. So what's the alternative? Freeform magic systems are found in the likes of EasyD6, which might be the best example. In EasyD6, you say that you want to do something, anything, with magic. You roll, and if you succeed, it happens. And if not, something goes wrong. And it's super fun to do this. It's freeform, and it allows for this element of chaos to creep in as the dice decide how your attempts at spellcasting goes. But while there are games like this, I want to drive home the point that in these systems, they are not tactical. And before anyone accuses me of talking bad on EasyD6, that's not the case. Again, DM Scotty executed on a specific style of fantasy with flying colours. Great job, bud. But tactics don't play nicely with randomness and a lack of fixed detail. I mean, I've seen systems where a person says they're gonna cast magic and then they roll a dice to see what happens. As in, the only choice you have is whether or not you turn on the randomness machine. That is pure chaos, and that would not suit a tactical game. I made a TikTok a while ago and the responses highlighted this issue massively. Not the issue with these kinds of systems, but that people don't get that a magic system with freeform magic is very different from a tactical game, because, again, tactics and chaos mix like Kool-Aid and gravy. And before you cite examples, because I know of examples, those systems with both in one end up being either incredibly complex to accommodate for the freedom, or they put rules in to make it tactical and freeform, but it still involves at-the-table interpretation, which means it doesn't work tactically because tactical gameplay needs a degree of fairness. If people are going to bang on about balance in tactical games, then we need to do ourselves the service of at least acknowledging that truth. So, we have fixed versus freeform. Which is better? Well, I think chaos is good for magic, but for any tactical approach to work, it needs constraints. I do think that we should remove this idea that a game's magic system is bad because it has fixed spells, and it's not random enough. Instead, I think spells need to feel more like a power that you can only mostly control. Not in a frustrating chaos sense, but with risk and danger. And this is what I've done with Sanctum. Magic is something where you choose what you do, but how dangerous and chaotic the spell is depends on how much you want to poke and prod the angry force that is magic. So, to be specific, Sanctum doesn't have slots, which means you could theoretically cast spells all day. You have control over this power, but you also know not to test it. When you cast a spell, you get to choose how difficult the casting will be. This is a concept carried over from draft 1 of the game, by the way, because when you cast a spell, instead of losing slots or mana points, you make a roll to see whether everything goes as planned, or you get hurt. Let's run through a scenario so I can show you what I mean. A giant stinking rat comes skittering out of a hole in the cave and bounds towards you. On your turn, you raise your staff and choose the fire spell. I mean, it's just the one rat, so you choose to cast it as a bolt, a single target shape that hurts more as you focus the flame. You chose to be a spell sage, which means you roll on the lore skill when making spellcasting rolls. You have a d12 in that skill, so you decide to just make it an easy casting, meaning you have to roll a 6 or higher. You roll the dice and get a 6. You succeed. You launch the bolt of flame at the rat, killing it with the 2 fire damage that the bolt deals. But then, 3 skulking goblins charge at you as you kill their beloved pet, Skits the rat. You don't fancy your chances against all 3 of them, so you ready another fire spell. But you think you're gonna need something stronger, a bit bigger than a bolt, something to hit all 3 of them at once. So you choose the cube shape instead. However, you're going to have to really boost this spell to kill all the goblins in one go. So you make it not a medium casting, not a hard casting, but an extreme casting. You make your roll, now having to roll a 12 on your d12. So close, an 11, which means you fail. But the spell still happens. The goblins all take 4 fire damage and fall down dead. From pushing the odious, the force of magic in Sanctum, too far, you lose a point of HP. That hurt, but it could have been way worse if those goblins had swarmed you. Oh yeah, and if you rolled a 1 when making either of those rolls, you'd have had to roll on the backfire table to see if your mouth filled with bugs, your fingernails turn to teeth, or your arms turn into tentacles, and a bunch more backfire options, with most of them being permanent transformations. So yeah, instead of just I use a slot, you choose how hard you push the spell. The chaos of the dice, choose whether or not the spell bleeds you for your hubris or twists your mortal body. As a result, this magic gives you control, but is still dangerous, with chaos drizzled on top. After working on it for so long, I love the spellcasting in Sanctum. Since there are no strict classes, you get to choose whether you have a lot of magic, or whether your smaller pool of spells are more powerful. Oh yeah, and you might have noticed this in the scenario, but you get to shape your spells to either be bolts, cubes, or other shapes. And just in case you think that sounds extra complex, after casting a spell maybe twice, you get it. Choose the spell, choose the difficulty, choose the shape, make the roll, and did you get a boo-boo? Magic systems are so varied. Different games try different things, but end up falling into one of 2 categories: listed spells or freeform. Sanctum is now on the more listed side, but when you see the rules, you see how different it is. Magic is just another thing in Sanctum that asks you to take a risk, to push yourself for the potential greater reward. And that's what I mean by risky mechanics. Magic in Sanctum feels like magic. Thank you for watching. I'm Ellis, and if you like this video, click the one on screen to see more about Sanctum. I love you all, and I'll see you next Saturday.